Yeah. And same thing, Twitter. Everyone's tweeting me now. What the fuck, man?
Well, what they're saying is that what happened, and I'm going to say the obvious.
Go
My
plastic
computer
syndrome, man.
sucks, man. It bogged down again, but we're back. We're back for part 2. So
Lots of GPS problems, man.
please,
are we live?
We are. Please let us know if the stream's coming through and you can hear us. And God willing, we can get through this. I'm gonna give this one more shot, and that's it.
All the windows are all over the place, and I'm like not even on the screen. But oh well.
Well, I'm waiting for confirmation here. I'm gonna get a little bit of confirmation. I asked if they could hear us. We got people coming back to watch us already. I 100% apologize. I don't know what's going on. This thing just keeps kicking off. It's been doing it all day. But I'll try once again to get it fixed. So
we got nothing but beard.
He says he can hear us.
Yeah, no, beard.
All we got is plastic.
It's the glorious beard going on down there, man.
Okay. All right. So, we talked about, this is the second part. First part, we talked about the inception and everything of Transformers. So, what everyone is waiting for is this big debate. And that's what we're going to talk about. It's the debate of which is better, G1, G2. Now, I had this topic in my pocket for a while, and I've been wanting to get the two of you together specifically for this. And although everyone thinks they know what I'm going to say, here's what I want to do. I don't care who goes first, but Plasticon, you are going to debate as to why G1 is better. And Daniel, you're going to debate on why G2 is better.
Okay.
Guys, think you can handle that?
Yeah, it shouldn't be too hard.
All right, who wants to go first? Who wants to hit it right up? Actually, since it's G1, Jason, since you are debating for G1, go for it. Mm-hmm. You're up first.
Okay, let's see here. Let's go to, if we're going to talk about this direction, all I have to say is G1 actually had more molds than G2. Original molds.
Of course. Also had more years.
That's true. But there were a lot of unique molds that G1 had that G2 never did get.
Yep.
Star Saber and Victory Leo was a big one that most people, it never ended up in the States, nor did it end up on G1 or G2's shelves. Power Master gimmicks didn't never go over there, nor did the Headmasters. I don't think there were any G2 stuff like that.
No.
I would say, when it comes to the reuse of the original molds, build quality, I think they were a little more in, like I would say, like Prime's trailer, the plastic quality is not as rigid. Would be the right word to say.
Compared to the G2? Mm-hmm. The argument I would give is, in all honesty, I think that after going through the, I guess let's call it play testing of 2 years of G1, I found that the G2 toys were more or less, when they were using pre-existing molds, with the exception of, let's say, Devastator, G2 Optimus Prime's trailer, the black one, I think it's a lot stronger, less broken tabs on those doors, let's say, where the original G1, a little more fragile, based in its old Diaclon Microman roots of it being more of an older collector toy than it is a toy meant for children. But that's just my take on that.
What about like mold degradation? Could you tell her?
Well, G2 I will say is G2 I will say is guilty of that. That was the first sign of, at least in America. I know Japan had Black Zarek, but it was the first sign of GPS. More or less. Started with G2 with Slingshot and Electro from the laser rods. So G2 was the pioneer of that, if you don't count Black Zarek. And there was also
what about G2 or sorry, G1's or 1.5, as some people like to call it.
I do.
I was going to mention Skyhammer also.
Like this guy. Well, yeah, Skyhammer. You had all your
GPS going on it.
So GPS was actually a Pretender issue, a G1 issue before there became a Generation 2 issue.
Yeah, that's true. Now think about it more, looking at some of them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's true. And then you had the monster Pretenders with
Slog.
Yeah, with Slog. Yeah,
Slog would completely break.
So I take it back. Actually, G2 had nothing to do with the.
Britzelback.
But it's good. Hey, that works in my favor. That works in my favor.
It does, but I mean,
I was going to bury it originally, but then I'm like, actually, now that I think about it, no, G2 is still good for that.
Yeah, Skyhammer. In my opinion, I think.
I know. I'm looking at them now.
I'm trying to figure out which came out first. I don't know if Skyhammer came out first or the Monster Bots came out, or the I
think it was the same year.
I think it was about the same. So you had those first, and then after
I want to
that,
say, I mean, Monstructor came out and they actually had rubber molded Pretender shells. Everything else before that was plastic.
Sure.
To a degree, yes.
So I could see that, maybe that was a later thing. Because didn't they not have as many rubber pieces on a lot of Pretenders for G1?
Well, the plastic that was used on the belts and stuff for a lot of
the belts and the helmets.
Yeah, it was of a more softer PVC that is very similar to that of the Monster Pretender shells themselves. Just it's not as thick. You know what I mean? It's because they both have. I'll use. I don't even know what the term is. They both sweat, which is the best way to put it. Which is you'll find some of the Pretender shells. I find when they've been stored in I guess moist places and stuff. They start to get a goo on them, and that's not just the Monster Pretenders. They're the ones that are most guilty of it. Mm-hmm. But I've encountered Landmine and a few others where the helmet and
the belt.
And gun, there's some kind of secretion on them or something. Or
and then you also get the spots, especially on the white, like on the belts. Any of the white belts, they get little spots on them. And
that's something
the Monstructor shells were horrible for that, where they would get spots.
And apparently, again, I actually learned this from My Little Pony collectors, like G1 My Little Pony collectors. Apparently, they call it pony cancer, which is it's just oxygen and moisture gets stuck in the plastic and causes the mold from the inside. And that's why they call it pony cancer, because apparently the pony's getting cancer or something. It's getting a cancer deposit. But yeah, it's something that, I learned this from a My Little Pony collector, because I had a whole bunch of carded ones from the 80s, and she was inspecting, it doesn't have pony cancer, and she gave me the whole story. And I'm like, it's starting to make sense now. So, but they suffered from that too. A lot of carded monster bots from Monstructor are most guilty of that. And it's the same thing. I learned that through carded My Little Ponies that suffer from the same problem. Apparently moisture would get stuck under the card from being in the factory all those years, and maybe it was really hot that day, who knows, and that moisture stayed in there and it stayed inside the plastic all those years, and then causes mold rot over all those years, which is, it's found in wood. So it's not surprising that it'd be found in low quality PVC plastic or a rubbery kind of PVC or I don't know, I'd have to ask a metallurgist who would know this or something, but either way, and not to mention, I just remember now because I was looking at my Lio Kaiser and I forgot about Kill Bison.
Yeah, Lio Kaiser,
yes.
Another 1.5, it's not G2, it's 1.5.
Wow.
A lot of people want to call it Generation 2. It's not. It just isn't. There's no G2 logos
Kaiser?
on it.
I would put
I'm
Leo
talking about
Kaiser
the Rescue Force.
Right. But I was sitting here thinking Leo Kaiser to me would be G1.
Of course it is.
And then the laser rods and everything, that's where I kick into the 1.5 because they really didn't go under the G2 banner. And so that's kind of like that was like a transition. That's
how can that be when they had the G2 insignias?
It's G2. I wouldn't call
that's the only argument I got with that.
I know it is, but I just because I look at G2 and what it is and how gaudy the colors were and everything, and these just don't fit. The what were the other ones?
I don't know. Jolt was pretty gaudy.
Well, what were the cars?
Are you talking about the GoBots?
Jolt,
No, the
Bolt,
Ultra-
Sizzle, and Electro.
Yeah, but
All the
then
GoBots
talking
were
him?
gaudy
GoBots.
as hell.
But were they G1 or G2?
That's G2. It's G2 GoBots.
Okay.
I mean, Soundwave was he could land a plane, even though he wasn't one.
So if you had something that was Machine Wars,
I feel that anything. Well, Machine Wars is something under that
That's
banner.
after.
Machine Wars.
Night Sword, yes, that's what I was trying to remember.
When you're talking 93 to 95 of Transformers, with the exception of the Legends stuff that was going on in the UK, that kind of came out around that same time, which I could attribute. We could call them the early prototypes of what would be G1 reissues.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's kind of the first version of that before Takara started doing them into the late 90s. But with the exception of that, I think everything falls under that G2 banner, from 93 to 95 before Beast Wars rolls out. Even,
Yeah.
I mean, you would look at G2 merchandising that wouldn't have really G2 written on it, but it would have the same font of G2. G2 had a different font for the Transformers logo than it did then. But yet it would have, like, let's say a G1 Ultra Magnus looking watch, Now, Ultra Magnus never had a G2 toy, never had any kind of indication of that, but yet here's a G1 looking Ultra Magnus watch and a G1 Ultra Magnus Tiger Electronics G2 game, which is rare as hell. I've been trying to track that down for years. It's, by any indications, if you would have found that loose, you would think it's G1 related, but it's under the G2 banner in that same time frame, in that same year.
Well, what about
I always thought it was weird that, like the European stuff, like take all the Aqua dudes, right? Mm-hmm. If you look at the first release ones that were not the Stormtroopers, but the ones before those that actually got ported to the United States as G2 in a different complete color, if you look at the card backs on those looked G1 card back.
Mm.
Well,
and not to mention,
I really don't consider those G2.
But that's where the confusion comes through. And that's what I'm saying. They don't really fit in G1, and they don't really fit in G2.
They're like this in-between thing that went on. Like the bits and pieces that got released for Rescue Force that had no G2 logos on them whatsoever.
Right.
And they're not G2. They were basically a recolor of a G1 mold. And they didn't even complete Lyle Kaiser. They only did 4, which kind of sucks. I mean, I'm sorry, it does. But
makes legs.
Not saying it's an inferior type. But the thing is, they even changed the weaponry on the things, too.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, they had 2 variants with that also.
Yeah, there's color variants. So, like the drill one has silver or black guns.
All of them. They all have that same kind of thing.
Silver, black, and red.
Silver or red.
Yeah.
Silver, red. Yeah, silver, red.
But the thing that gets me going is I know we're getting off topic on this, just real quick. It always made me wonder why they picked those 4, why they didn't do the other 2, and why they didn't make it a combiner when they had the ability. There has to be reasons. The same aspect that they did the European Constructicons and didn't give them any combining bits.
I think
honestly,
maybe it had more so to do with budget at the time. It was 92, which was a transitional period for Transformers because, again, G1 ended in 91 in America. G2 would start in 93. Yeah. So 92 was kind of this year where Japan kind of got stuff, UK got stuff, Canada got stuff, which was just the UK stuff, but the States didn't. So I think that because the smaller regions at the time were the ones getting stuff, they probably, now mind you, Japan had its own thing going on with Operation Combination and everything.
Right.
But at least in the case of the UK, they're probably like, well, this is a smaller market for us. Maybe we'll just pick and choose stuff here and there. I mean, it's the same way how, like you said, the Constructicons didn't have the combiner pieces, but they just had the straight up figures and their weapons to a minor degree. Mm-hmm. They were individual carded.
They had some color differences too.
Yeah, I was about to say, I believe in variant.
There are gray bits on some of them.
Yeah.
And this is, okay, talk about false advertising. The G2 commercial they have for Devastator is the UK one combined. Watch it because you see the gray bits all over it.
You never know. Maybe they had just the pieces there. But it's the same thing where I'm just looking over here and I'm just trying to make sense of that year, because I always sort everything by years, and that was just a weird year, because that was the Operation Combination / Skyquake Thunderclash kind of thing going on in the UK. So I mean, and to me that's a transitional period, because to me that is still G1. That's still G1, that stuff. Yeah. That's not G2, because G2 to me, 93 to 95 is G2. Whatever came out. And
that's why I sold those off. There's a lot of people like, why did you sell off all your Pretenders and stuff? Because they're not actually G2. Yeah. They weren't. They just weren't. Even in the comic books, I've read the UK comics that were predecessors to the G2 comics we got over here, and there are 2 issues that pretty much did not come out. And unless you actually read them, they literally are copies of the toys that were on the shelves in the States. Yeah. It was funny because nobody was like, well, where did all these come from? These aren't in the actual comic books until way later. And it's like, these things were actually there. You had Grimlock that was blue in the UK comic, red Slag and a green Snarl. You also had Bludgeon,
just a carryover fictional. Well, but he's a carryover fictionally. It's the same way how like the G2 comic books by Marvel carried a lot of G1 characters as carryovers. I mean, the likes of Nightbeat dying in it and stuff like that. But that was just more from a fictional standpoint, less from a product standpoint, where they're like, well, we're only going to feature G2 product. I mean, you would have like stuff that wasn't explained, like, getting a black sideswipe, even though they didn't explain why the body transition happened. But at the same time, here's Nightbeat that never got a body swap or anything like that manner. Or even if you want to be really like picky, I mean, there's an Ironhide from the UK in the late end of G2, and I mean, Ironhide never made an appearance in that form as a carryover. Neither did a lot of the G2 GoBot stuff. That never made an appearance in the comics, obviously because the comic kind of tanked.
Actually, yes, it did. There's only one frame of it, and that's at the very beginning of the UK comics.
Oh, maybe.
You see Bumblebee in his GoBot form.
In that interesting
it's that's the thing. A lot there's some really, really craziness if you actually go and look at look at each frame of every one of the comics. Well, it's crazy.
Japan was a lot more. See, that's another way how I use my frame of reference of what G2 is, because Japan always had pack-in fiction with all the G2 stuff there, and everything from the GoBots to which later they would use as the spy changers, the laser rods, Hero Prime, which they called Battle Convoy, all of that kind of laser rod opposite prime, so they called Battle Convoy. And then Hero Prime later with the Hero Megatron. All of that stuff was brought over. And it was interesting because it was brought over literally when Beast Wars was just coming out for us. So like it was paralleling there, where they were getting that as brand new product while we were getting Beast Wars, and even when the cartoon was in its early inceptions too of the first season. So, but I mean, again, we're kind of getting off topic. Like the topic originally was
let's talk engineering here, okay?
Yeah.
Engineering. G1 pretty much kind of set like the bar of what engineering needed to be.
Totally, I agree with that. Where, I mean, mind you, it's engineering from 1977, most of it. That kind of, I want to say, got more simplistic and degraded as it went more into the Hasbro in-house engineering. I mean, you see the transition of design from, let's say, 86 into 87 with the Headmasters. You look at something like, Chrome Dome, not exactly the sexiest looking toy or articulation or very brick-like, but the flip side of it is you can't break that guy even if you wanted to. You can throw him at a wall, he'll bounce right back.
Okay, so let me ask you this, Jason.
Yes.
Why G1? If you had to definitively say why G1 is better than G2, if you had to give 3 specific points, what would the 3 points be?
First off, I would say G1 because cartoon series.
Okay.
Comic book series, and the large line of toys that came out. and how strong that had. But let's put it this way: how much of an influence that has put on everybody that collects Transformers. Period.
Okay, so you're basing a lot of what you're saying on the history of it, what you grew up with, what you're used to seeing. I can respect that. What do you think about innovation? You know,
I would say
you're talking about it's the first time we've been exposed to these in the United States, and I think even in Canada, as opposed to Japan. So this is it. This is what you're used to. So this is something new. It's not your 12-inch GI Joe and your Barbies and all this stuff and your Army Men that we were used to, Hot Wheels. This was something different. So I get with you that. Anything else that you think you want to do to more strengthen your stance?
I would say there were less prototypes for G1 that were not released as there were for G2.
Yeah, but to me that has more to do with what's available, what's actually been shown. Because I believe there's a lot more people out there that have stuff that just they're just not going to say.
I'm going to reach for that book.
But you know what I'm talking about, Daniel. You know what I mean.
I'm looking at that book right now.
Just because you haven't seen them doesn't mean they're not out there.
Yeah.
I think that you can't prove that one. I don't think there's any way you can prove that statement.
Well, honestly, is there a book that literally tells you every G1 prototype that was never released, even stuff that probably neither one of you guys have seen? I'm sure there's stuff out there that you guys haven't.
No matter what's documented, there's still all that stuff that's not documented.
Right.
Think about it for this.
In G2, there's so many
but think about
that were documented not being released.
Every single figure that's G1, G2, Beast Wars, regardless, everything, there was a prototype for it. Whether or not it's documented, you can find it, whatever, it's there. They didn't just say, hey, this is what we want, and made it.
Never ends.
Right. What is this book? I need to see this book.
The Generations Guide Deluxe Edition.
Yep.
Okay, I don't have that book. That's why.
For every figure, it's not just a one and go. Right? Mm-hmm. There's many steps, many.
It's like Power Master
all the way up until the actual item. So
it's like Power Master Prime.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about in between prototype stages. I'm talking about they made a prototype of this toy, but it never got released. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. G2, there were several. There were some that people are still kind of butthurt about, like the combiners.
I just think
they never got those
because we are in the era right now where a lot of the G2 stuff is come out. It seems like it's more common. There's more of it. But I'd be willing to bet there's just as much G1 stuff. It's just no one's talking about it.
I don't know. I mean, there's several things I've seen. Like, take, for instance, that weird colored Scorponok that came up. And I know you guys probably saw it on TFW 2005 is where I saw the link from that's come up. It's this weird one that's got like a green gun and there's like green horns on him. This thing is basically a prototype of something that I remember seeing in the MicroMaster commercials. A lot of people don't realize that's where the heck that was probably going to come out.
There's two different Scorponoks from those MicroMaster commercials that got beat up in stop motion. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I know what you're referring to there. But those might be one-offs. You know what I mean? Those are different things that are done for more promotional sake, if anything, and commercials and stuff like that. But I mean, I don't know if that would be an argument for why G1 is better because there's less stuff that's been not released. But where I think it's quite the opposite. I think G1, because it's a much bigger line that lasted for so much longer, there's tons of stuff I think every year had something on the cutting room floor that never got released, right up to Action Masters with not getting an RC. You know what I mean?
It's true.
And then, I mean, the big mamma jamma is, hey, where's our Unicron? All three different versions that we never got. You know, the Takara one that was had an orbiting gimmick, and the Hasbro one that it was supposed to speak. You know, and it's just, I think that if you want to talk about that, I think G1 has a lot more unreleased stuff, which is, to me, it's an appeal. but at the same time could be also an argument of inferiority, I guess, maybe.
Well, it's like take the G2 cyber jets. These little this is Skyjack, which Skyjack just got a release in the new RID series, which I'm glad to see that name come back. But these guys actually had different bits because Rick Alvarez actually showed us, and this is a previous podcast we did a long time back, that there were actually going to be add-on parts, and they wouldn't have had the flick fire arm. There was going to be a lot of different add-on parts that actually built guns and such on these. So these guys actually literally had a complete changeover of what they actually were going to be, which is a complete different toy, kind of like Power Master Prime with the combination with God Genrai, with the God Bomber add-on, because it was complete different changes they did there. I personally think these would have been better if they actually would have released them the way they were going to release them, with all the parts, because it bulked these things out and they didn't look so crazy.
Well,
but stuff like that's what I'm talking about. It's like those little teeny tiny changes like that could have really enhanced this line, but it didn't.
Okay. So, Daniel, give me 3 reasons why G2 is better.
First reason, number 1, relevancy. It's what I wanted to actually kind of bring up originally. When their rival company at the time, Bandai of America, was planning in late 92, early 93, they were planning this big port over of an important brand that's been going on for 23 years in Japan. Bandai of Japan was planning to bring over Power Rangers, or what was called Sentai in Japan, and they were bringing over the Kyo Ranger line. Now, why am I bringing this up? Well, at the time, Hasbro, like I said, they know what's coming from the inside. And so when they were like, oh, man, we got to keep up with this. Interesting how their Dinobots were colored in a way to kind of almost confuse the purchaser of a rival Dino line that was going to be coming at the exact same time in that of Power Rangers. And so I find that G2's major thing was, especially in why that first wave was just repaints and remolds and stuff like that, was to get into the market and be relevant against a coming Power Ranger line that was going to be the return of popularity of robots after a large absence in what I like to call the Ninja Turtle era and the anthropomorphic animal era that we went through during much of 1987 up until about 1991 and 92, where then we transitioned to a other kind of mutant that took that popularity in X-Men and Spider-Man and stuff like that. But the point being is that the return to form with robots, with Power Rangers, and what Bandai was planning in Bandai of America with Saban, they rushed to get G2 out, and you see it with the multicolored Dinobots. They could have went straight up and went with Dinobots in the original iconic gray, but they went with the multicolored ones too, because Lord knows there was another multicolored Dino team coming from Power Rangers at the same time. So relevancy was the first most important thing about G2, was it kept Transformers relevant at a time when it kind of already bowed out because of Ninja Turtles in 87, 88, and was really quiet for many years. It always was there, but never was making a true impact. I always, I've said in previous podcasts how Transformers, especially during that time, was doing anything they could to be relevant. Micromasters with Micro Machines, or Action Masters with the action figure boom of the mutant toys from Toy Biz that was doing the Marvel stuff at the time. They were just trying to do anything just to be relevant. So G2's purpose was to keep them relevant, but at the same time put out some product, that was very little. Not much had to worry about in terms of engineering. Retool an Optimus Prime, get rid of the safety issues and the breakage issues and the drop test problems that exist in the original G1 toy. Again, that G2 Prime trailer is a lot more solid. You could drop that 100 times, and it's a much more flexible black plastic. Also, they kind of removed some of the other things on that toy that was just not necessary from a parts standpoint, just for stuff not to get lost, make it cheaper. Added a voice box, which was a gimmick that was becoming more predominant at the time and more popular. Added extra weapons. Again, retooled here and there to make it more, more interesting. Same thing what they did with, Jazz and Sideswipe, they just added a little extra missile launcher, got rid of the more fragile chromey kind of stuff that wasn't necessary on it because, number one, obviously stuff got broken and they saw that the small little hilts on the chrome ones would break, they would scrape. Not necessary. Even in the case of Jazz, a G2 Jazz uses a better plastic than the original G1 Jazz, so that's brittle. I don't know specifically what the difference in plastic is, but it is a stronger plastic. I don't know what it is exactly. Maybe it's a change of a different kind of PVC to another kind of PVC, but there clearly is a change in plastic. Same thing with, I was just about to mention Sideswipe. His spoiler was very brittle on the original G1 toy. A lot of G1 Sideswipes in the secondary market have stress marks and or cracks on the spoiler. It's like they use the same kind of plastic this time for that spoiler for the G2 one, and they put stickers on it this time. Maybe they add a little bit of extra little grab and give on it. So right away there was the whole point of just trying to keep relevant, having that engineering from learning from the mistakes of the previous G1 toys that were quite fragile, even up to Action Masters with breaking O-rings a la G.I. Joe style. So that's another thing too. Another thing also, which I always felt was important, was an engineering leap in terms of the characters, which is the invention of the ball joint, which up to that point, you could look at Action Master Elites and they had universal joints, which were probably the closest we would have ever gotten to like really good articulation. Where if you look at, say, Omega Supreme and Turbo Master, they had a very good universal joint system going on, but it was still ratchets. It wasn't ball joints yet. And ball joints were actually born out of that need to have stuff that didn't break. Because a ball joint pops out, you pop it back in, it doesn't go under any duress. Yes, obviously a ball joint could get loose, but they didn't think of the long-term impacts of ball joints. They thought of more of the short-term thing where you could break a toy out of the package. You couldn't break a ball joint out of the package, at least back then. Now you have dried out plastic and fractures in a ball joint and stuff like that. Back then it's a different story. So the ball joint was birthed out of the protection of the longevity of a toy and stuff not breaking and the problems that persisted with G1, but it also led to great articulation, great posability, and then leading to also, and from an engineering leap, being able to make legs and arms twist in ways that could be stored better to make better transformations. There was a huge leap in that with Generation 2 exclusively with that. Now, obviously, there's negatives in G2 when it comes also from an engineering standpoint. There was a lot of simplicity too, because of the fact that it was more of a budget line in the sense that, didn't have exactly a brand. Yeah, well, I wouldn't really say Megatron. Megatron had a voice box. No, but he had a voice box though, which was something expensive to be putting in toys of that era. I would think more along the lines of stuff like the GoBots when the line was on its way out. I would think more along the lines of the fact that they just, again, they would do repaints and stuff in the second wave of G2 stuff. That's when they started then tackling Superion and Bruticus, when they really at that point they didn't need to be repainting stuff, but yet they were still doing that. Where Devastator was wave 1 though. Devastator was available in the first wave.
The orange one was a repaint though.
Yes, it was.
But that was a store exclusive.
Yes, it was a KB. That was a KB store, and it was also UK.
Okay. But that's just it. So it gets to that kind of standpoint where I feel from an engineering standpoint, G2 was a leap forward that is still prevalent today in our toys, where it's very rare today that we see old engineering concepts from Generation 1 found in our toys today, and a lot more of Generation 2's stuff, because Generation 2 was created at a time where quality of plastic had to be better, breakage issues, stuff breaking out of the packaging. It was the 90s. The 90s was a boom for action figures. 80s was the beginning of the action figure boom, but the 90s was just so much stuff was coming out. And when stuff comes out, you learn also from the mistakes. When a lot of stuff comes out, that means you could learn from all the mistakes of all this product coming out. Well, sure. If using rubbers or using ball joints or using ratchet joints and stuff like that. And as a result, G2, was able to prosper because of that, and then later on lead into Beast Wars and then continue on. Beast Wars, even though it's its own separate line, is literally the next evolution of G2's engineering. just with animals.
Absolutely.
And what they learned from that. G2 was the first ever Transformer line to really store weapons, like universally all around. Where,
technically, Machine Wars was.
Well, yeah, I guess. Well,
it's kind of hard because Machine Wars was also
the way
a store exclusive, also.
Because the reason why I say that is because the way that I see it, almost every single G2 toy, and it even goes to like the remolds of G1 stuff. You look at G1 Jazz, he can't put his chrome gun on himself in car mode, but yet they made sure they went out of their way with the G2 Jazz that he could hold that gun. Now, granted, G2 Starscream, there is a way to kind of store those fists on him and to put that voice box on the alt mode.
Right.
But at the same time, it's not perfect. But in general, I would have to say, if I had to really put a number, like it would be like 95% of G2 really had a good obsession with storing their weapons in both modes. Like making a really good use of that, which then became a gold standard by Beast Wars. Like there was literally nothing that was left behind at that point.
Right, but I'm looking at like, you had your, and I'm trying to remember the Machine Wars, and then they had their repaints, but those you could store the weapons with, and even
which
with
were technically two toys.
Yeah, and even with the European ones. The Aquafine and Hydra
Dread, and
you could incorporate the weapons into the alt mode also. So,
but that's something that
Rage.
That wasn't spread across. See, again,
sure.
the only
I'm just saying.
thing,
I'm agreeing with you that they took an idea and they're building upon it. And then you're right. And then when they went into the ball joints, and if you look at it, in my opinion, and this is something I wanted to bring up, you had Beast Wars, which were 99% ball joints, and then you went past that, and if you even look at Masterpiece, and a lot of people like Masterpiece, and even third parties, there's incorporated ball joints, and what I mean by that is tolerance levels, which means like they could pop off before they break. And that's across the board now.
But if you think about this, though, G1 brought in the ratchet joint and kind of set the bar for what a ratchet joint actually does and how it works.
Well,
and
the other
if you look at a lot of the
thing they brought in
third-party toys, they got ratchet joints. And if you look at the engineering aspect behind the ratchet joint, it's literally pulled from G1.
Larger toys will always have ratchet joints, though, just due to weight.
Correct.
I
but
mean,
they'll also
any
have the
class
die-cast.
will still have it. Yeah.
The die-cast from that also.
Yeah.
And a ball joint's not going to work on die-cast. You have to have
the thing is, especially like I always see when it comes from a engineering evolution, you have G2, which kind of brought the ball joint, Beast Wars, which made it a universal thing, and then taking what they learned from Beast Wars and applying it to the Alternators line, which was that first marriage of really trying to do something that was a little more the mix of the two with die cast and still have ball, because Alternators had ball joints all over the place. Whether you like it or not. I mean, sometimes that kind of made the transformations difficult for some people, but in general, like I find that's when they really started applying it to stuff. I mean, you could say car robots, but I feel was like the remnants of the engineering of Beast Wars Neo, which was, it still was just ball joints on a smaller scale, where I found that Alternators was kind of like that next step. Alternators really was that next step to then lead to what would be Generations and Classics and all of that stuff. And then into what would be Masterpiece, with the very first Masterpiece MPO1 Optimus Prime, 20th anniversary Optimus Prime, whatever you wanted to call him, back in 2003, and then you see it with the Datsuns, you see it with, and when you're talking ball joints, I mean, look no further than, like, let's say even the hand of the Jets for the Masterpieces, like Starscream stuff. They got ball joints for each one of their knuckles and stuff to have the articulation. All of that stems from G2. G2 was the first to bring that to the game, but it was all pretty much birthed out of safety regulations and just, to get the figures to be less breakable. So that's another thing G2 is better about than G1. But again, it's an unfair comparison because of a different era and G2 being a lot smaller, where G1's a lot larger, and so it's a bigger net to cast for mistakes.
True.
Well,
I mean, I'm thinking like gimmick wise. G1 had masters. You had spring-loaded missile launchers. You also had the Power Masters, which would unlock and cause a thing to completely transform a different direction. And like, say, Dreadwing, and that itself, the G1 Dreadwing, was, to me, that was a really weird combination thing that G1 brought in that G2 didn't do until later on when they did release their version of Dreadwing.
Well, you mentioned Dreadwing. Like, you have Smokescreen and Dreadwing from G2, which had a unlocking gimmick too. When you put Smokescreen, the smaller jet in the back, it unlocks the tank mode for the ATB. You know, when you're talking gimmicks, that's the invention of the Rotoforce was introduced in G2, which was a spring-loaded kind of whirlybird gimmick. You had the Aqua Force. You had, I'm just looking over here. You know, you had. With the kind of Hot Wheels thing going on with the GoBots, where they worked on Hot Wheels tracks and they had the free spinning wheels and the storing weapons for all of them. You had the laser rods, which a lot of fans really loved, like with the light up gimmicks, which again didn't exist in G1 really, to have like a light up weapon.
There were but there weren't light up weapon gimmicks, but there were light up gimmicks.
It goes all the way back to unless you count like Shockwave with his hand. In general, like a light up translucent weapon really wasn't present until it was a thing with Generation 2.
Well,
Galvatron as well.
The color change gimmick with water, that was a G2 thing. Again.
Well, you guys didn't even mention Inferno.
In its short period of 3 years.
Water shooters.
Yeah. So, I mean, you guys didn't even mention Inferno.
Well, see, in G1
that's a G1 mold, but then they added
the water spray gimmick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but there's one thing they did to G2 Infernal that they didn't do to G1, and that's they got rid of the spring-loaded firing hands.
Right.
Well, again,
they completely got rid of that. They gutted that.
There's part of me that says that's because of honestly, I think it's 100%. It's because of cost. It was cheaper. No springs, no this, that, and the other. You make it simple. It slides in, and bam. I think it was a cost factor.
Not to mention it's cost, but it goes back to the gutted, missing stuff from Jazz and everything like that too.
Right.
You don't need those missiles anymore. Yeah, Devastator was the same way. There's no more missile anymore to be lost for Inferno. There's all of that stuff. That's just it was product that had to be put out from a rival company that had their own stuff going on at the same time. A lot of people were paying attention when Power Rangers came out. Not a lot of people were paying attention when Transformers came out, but they rushed to get that product out there because Lord knows they had to be out there when someone else was going to get into the robot game and possibly change the game at that point. You have to understand the Sentai brand was a big brand in Japan for 23 years up to that point. So, not 23, I think 13 years up to that point. And it's just for them to let that slide on Takara's side and Hasbro's side, they had to do something. Bandai of America.
You also have you have the cartoon series though. I mean, for G2, honestly, to me, I don't see why they couldn't have followed the comic books for G2 instead of coming up with some Cybercube thing and rehash the old G1 cartoons.
But that's just it. Yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole reason with that is that it was cheaper just to rehash that, and the changes they just stuck in this little cube, flip it over and change that. You change the bumpers at the beginning and at the end. Boom, you got a whole new cartoon. Didn't cost as much.
Well, Cybernetic Space Cube, I would not be surprised because the G2 cartoon came after the toys were released. A lot of the G2 commercials, which featured CG, which was the first time that was used for Transformers. Up to that point, Transformer commercials were all original cell animation, literally all the way up until Action Masters with, Who Will Join Me, with Michael Bell and Peter Cullen. Then they started doing CG across the board for everything. It's actually where also Gary Chalk got his first voice acting gig, was doing voiceovers for those G2 commercials in Transformers. And
yeah, but this is the thing though.
Yeah.
When it comes to voice actors, everybody, even to this day, still, I mean, they still think Peter Cullen is Optimus Prime.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what he's most known for.
Well, it's
what
it's like
did.
this.
It's what they
did.
What
do you
think? The one problem
right,
is,
but this is my thing.
I can't give an argument for G2 because it's all G1 voice actors. So
that's what I'm saying is
unless I mention Gary Chalk being Jetstorm in the G2 commercial or one of the or Manta Ray from Rotoforce, like it's not going to be very easy to argue against you on that one.
Well, sure, but if you ask him about his resume, he's not going to mention that first. Now, is he?
No.
Well, it's because he can't say he voiced a G2 role because there was no G2 role to voice. Like I said, if you had to really pinpoint and go, what are G2 exclusive voice roles? They all stem from the commercials, and it's Victor Corelli with his with his voiceover stuff, and that's really about it, with the exception of Gary Chalk, and maybe there was probably a few other characters, that got voiced over. But
and what was the boy? Because he was actually.
Oh no, but that's season 5 G1. You're talking about Tommy Kennedy.
G2, right?
Nah, it's technically season 5 G1.
Cartoons. The toy commercials, where he picked him up, and who was that?
I don't know about that. That's kind of stretching.
Yeah, but who was that?
The aerial bots are taking their shots. Silver bolts, Reds, and Combaticons. Change to be rearranged to make the super robot Superion. I don't know.
Again, that's right now we can have a nice little, rap going on right now. So I mean, that's good. That's good stuff right there.
The one metamorphin Dudicus. They all combine to make Superions behind in the big bad battle in Bruticus. Robots in disguise.
See, the only thing you're missing is like the scratching of the record,
I can't argue with that. That's actually so awesome still to this day.
And it's not just that one. It was like, I think they did it for the Laser Oz. They did it for the Rotoforce. Yeah.
Dude, it was Fly at that time. Come on now.
Yeah. There you go.
All right.
That's I don't want rap music.
So I really, really hate to end this conversation on 80s rap music. But or would that be 90s? I guess that'd be 90s rap.
It's 90s.
90s rap. Okay. So all right. So the big thing is G1 versus G2. Let's face it. G2 wouldn't be around unless you had G1. Everything afterwards wouldn't be here unless you had G2. It's a segue into it.
Yep.
Right?
That's true.
We all can agree on that.
True.
It's a building block.
I completely agree on that.
It's a building
considering, considering
he
puts me on a different pedestal, considering I'm like the complete Generation 2 nutcase here.
Hey, the whole idea is debate. You got to be put on the spot.
And like I said, I mean, I had experience with different toys than most people did. And I mean, I've had a Grandus. Proto Man actually has my Grandus now. I mean, I've played with toys in G1 that completely blows the minds of most people. And it's like, if you didn't play with that Grandus, you played with Dagbase from Brave series, if you ever had that. If you didn't have that, then you never have touched that mold ever. There are molds out there that G2 gave us that G1 didn't, but G1 also had molds that never trickled into G2, and most people had never even touched, like a Star Saber and such. They're very hard to get a hold of. They're expensive. And most people are like, oh, well, I don't, they take that money and go buy a third-party version or a masterpiece version of Star Saber instead of buying like the original.
Well, I think the big thing that when I had this discussion in mind, and I kind of knew it was going to go this way, I'm still going to say it's a stalemate. It really is, because whether you grew up and your first prime was a G1 prime and that's the prime you remembered, or you grew up in the 90s and you remember your G2 prime and that's the first prime you remember, or as we've said before, your first show was Beast Wars or whatever, and that's your quote-unquote G1. Doesn't really matter. The whole idea is that they build upon each other. It built the brand, and it got us to where we are now.
Well, I will say this. Like, my first exposure to Transformers was the 86 movie, and trickle bits of Season 3 episodes that were aired in Canada. I did not get to see animation of the Constructicons and stuff like that from season 1 until the G2 episodes. That gave me an opportunity later in life that I didn't get before, because while I loved the 86 movie as a kid, I didn't have access to those Sunbow VHSs. Sure. Those weren't as easily accessible, for at least for me in my local area. And it wasn't until G2 came around that I get another opportunity to enjoy those G1 episodes.
Well,
again, like key episodes too,
sure.
Roll for It, Heavy Metal Wars, SOS Dinobots, all of those, because of Generation 2.
But
keeping and Generation 2 that came out almost 10 years after the fact of 80, because it came out 93 to 95, but almost 10 years after the fact of those original episodes debuting, a whole new generation of kids who were 10 that watched Generation 1 are now in their 20s, they're out of it, but a whole new generation of 10-year-olds being introduced to Transformers and those key characters because of Generation 2. Granted, they would then go forward into something that wouldn't feature those key characters at all, which is Beast Wars, but at least it gave the foundation for that.
Well, exactly.
I always thought this was crazy.
Well, real quick. The thing that I always that got to me is you had this gap of 10 years, and that's wonderful that you have a new generation. But like you said, you've got a new show that brings in the same characters, that reintegrates them into this. And what people today don't understand is we didn't have YouTube. We didn't have Hulu. We didn't have all these things where these shows were out there. You just had to get them. We didn't have them. You couldn't pay for them. You couldn't find them, period. Either they were on TV or they weren't. So by them being reintroduced was the only way that you could reintroduce this whole concept to a new generation.
Well, especially up to that point, the Sunbow VHSs, the oversized box VHSs of Transformers, only featured season 1 episodes. Mm-hmm. You couldn't get season 2 episodes. Those didn't exist on tape back then. Like, I think it was FHS. That was the one that was in charge of distributing them. FHE, excuse me. Family Home Entertainment, you're right. They were in charge of distributing those, but that, I think it covered only Ultimate Doom, Morta Meets the Eye, Roll for It, Heavy Metal Wars, SOS Dinobots. It was only season 1. So, and only if you had a Blockbuster or a Family Video or something that had those tapes, which, again, you're talking tapes that came out in 84, 85. If it was the 90s at that point, maybe they weren't kicking around anymore.
Right.
So this was sometimes it was quintessential, because what it did is we were introduced to these characters in the 80s. We were reintroduced to them and reminded of them again in the 90s, thanks to G2. Not so much so because of Beast Wars, but Generation 2 really did that. And in the 2000s, again, with the Energon trilogy and with the Unicron trilogy and everything, bringing up those names again and those designs again.
Sure.
I mean, every single one of those came back in some way or shape or form in the Unicron trilogy. So G2 serves a very important placeholder as much as in the 90s, Beast Wars was the one that brought Transformers back into true relevance and popularity and sales charts. It was G2 that kept those names alive, kept those trademarks alive, especially that too. That's a very important thing that people tend to forget. Sure. One of those trademarks were kept alive because of G2. That would have been completely absent if G2 didn't exist. We would have gone into Beast Wars without a Megatron trademark. We would have gone into Beast Wars without a Scorponok trademark, or a lot of those were kept alive.
All of them.
Or Dinobot, or Insecticon. That's, in a lot of ways, I stand by the belief that the GoBots line at the end of G2 was almost existed just to keep those brands, those IPs alive.
Right. Exactly, because of what they acquired and what they've since used.
Yeah.
They've used GoBot names throughout the newer lines.
Hell, they call it an individual G2 character GoBots.
Mm-hmm. But Jason, you were going to say something?
What I was going to say is we were talking about cost when it comes to G2 figures, right? I always thought it was odd, because it's like, okay, they reissued basically G1 Prime with different plastic trailer and all that stuff. If we're going to talk about cost, what about that crazy running change that Ultra Magnus went through, where he went from rubber wheels to plastic? They could have easily done the same thing with Prime during G2, but they chose not to,
Well,
quality.
that's where
That was a.
that's where you actually
was that or was that not a store
That's
exclusive?
crazy. Huh?
Well, here's the thing.
Those are
No, wait a minute.
there is you got the Ultra Magnus that came out, and I remember when I was a kid, I had an Ultra Magnus. Mine had rubber tires, painted face, all that stuff.
Right.
I had a friend of mine that had the same toy, except for his had plastic tires, unpainted face and stuff. And he saw mine and he flipped out. He's like, I must have gotten like a knockoff or something. I was like, no, it was a running change.
No, it's because he got his from KB. The Ultra Magnus that was a store exclusive was different than the mass produced one. Yes or no? That's what I understand.
Well,
Metroplex also.
86 in general, you're talking metal toe hot rod, plastic toe hot rod.
Now, see, those I don't know about, but for Ultra Magnus, I was always told that the one that had the least with the plastic wheels, non-painted face, was actually a store exclusive through KB, and it was cheapened up for that run.
And well, KB always was kind of more the economical direction for a lot of stuff too, so it's a possibility. But
they probably carry Metroplex the same way then, because Metroplex has the same running change.
But I've never heard KB attached to that.
See, that's what's weird. Like, was Metroplex
would KB
the
even
same
have space
thing?
for Metroplex?
I don't know, because I mean that's a pretty big toy too. The only thing I could think of, and I'm really stretching it out, and I'm gonna say right now, this is just my theory, is that maybe they made that in hopes of a store like KB picking that up because it's cheaper, and it didn't happen. So it was just mass released along with the rubber tire version, and it just came later.
Another thing also I want to play off of what Jason said, like when it comes to cost though, I found that Generation 1 G1 Optimus Prime, and I know this for a fact because a lot of my mint and box stuff still has the price stickers on them from Canada. Generation 1 Optimus Prime was $49.99 back in 1984 in Canada. In the States, it might have been cheaper, obviously, but in Canada it was $49.99. Where Generation 2 Optimus Prime, which I also have a mint and box copy of, was $29.99. Now, considering that Generation 2 Optimus Prime might have had a cheaper plastic, it did have the voice box. It did have other missiles. It did have other stuff. And I know, like I see from here, I have a mint on card, Generation 2 Inferno, and it says $14.99 from Zellers, which is a picture target in the States.
Right.
$14.99. I have a mint in box Inferno Generation 1. He was $29.99. You know, in 84 and 85, which is, I mean, what's ignoring inflation is still more, but with inflation, It's a whole other ball game on top of that. So now, granted, stuff was taken away, but I don't think there was so much taken away that it would justify such a huge cost gap. So Generation 2 toys were also relatively cheaper. And again, I attribute that more to the fact because when Ninja Turtles came onto the scene, it created this standard where it's like, hey, you can get a $5 toy. And kids will love it. And that became a standard across the board where I guess Hasbro realized, maybe we could make less profit and still sell toys and sell product. And so, but I'll say this, Generation toys were cheaper for usually sometimes the exact same figure. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes.
Right. So, I mean, how do I put this? You're going to have those gaps, like I was just reading. Mike Boyle said that I always thought the plastic wheeled Magnus was exclusive to the pack-in with the movies glow-in-the-dark poster. Which means that was around the time when they were doing the movie. That would make sense.
But see, here's the thing too. Canada never got KB toys. We never had that. That was always a privilege to go to the States. And we've had plastic wheel Ultra Magnuses.
Well, then that right there tells me that what I thought was incorrect.
But to play devil's advocate with it, but a lot of times when stuff is a store exclusive in the States, we get it through other means. If something is a Target exclusive in the States, we'll get it through sellers.
Now you have Ross and can't remember Rossi, the other one.
Yeah.
But it happens. So is that possible? Yes. I just always remember seeing that I still remember when I went through KB Toys, I saw all the orange Constructicons.
Devastator.
Yeah, I saw all those. I remember seeing the big G2 Optimus Prime. And I've got one right here. It actually is a bigger box, and I remember that. And I remember the Ultra Magnus. Now, can I sit here and say that I definitively remember that they were plastic wheels? No, I don't remember that. But I remember seeing it. So I know.
I want to touch base here with one thing. When it comes to Generation 1, there's been tons of reissues. Bukus of reissues. With G2, there's only been one.
Oh, no.
And that was Laser Prime.
No, there's been more than that.
What other ones were reissue?
Well, let's put it this way. We'll start with...
I'm not talking mold. I'm talking straight up reissue.
Straight up reissue.
Well, look at the Megatron. Megatron was reissued also as, what's it called? The Beast Wars, and even a Korean version.
No, I'm talking straight up.
What's
like
it called? Megastorm.
Oh, you're talking about Megastorm.
Megastorm. So
okay, you're talking Megastorm. You're talking Gigastorm. You're talking about a line that's under another name. I'm talking.
You said the same toy reissued, and I just gave it to you.
No. What I'm saying is
ATB Megatron.
When he was re-released, when this was re-released, it was re-released in a G2 box as Generation 2.
Okay.
Megastorm wasn't released that way. It was a completely different box.
No, it was released in a Beast Wars line.
Yeah, it was released as a Beast Wars toy, not a G2 toy. I think the colors are different too. What I'm talking about is like...
It was also a separate character. It wasn't an acknowledgement of the Generation 2 character.
Correct.
What I'm saying is,
Daniel, I'll agree with.
Okay. Yeah. You've got, like, when it comes to, like, reissues, like Hot Rod. Hot Rod's been reissued God knows how, like, at least twice. Am I right, Dan? Probably more than that, right? How often do you see these reissued?
I'm just trying. I'm staring at the collection right now.
What I'm saying is laser rods.
The laser rods?
You ever see a laser rod reissue? No. Will you ever see a G2 Starscream reissue?
I think. Well, you know what happens in let's put it this way. In this case, what happens with Generation 1 is those characters get reissued as those toys and those molds. What happens with Generation 2 is those molds get used as future characters. All of those Cyberjets, all of those the Flip Changers, which were G2 molds. ATB Megatron, also known as Dreadwind Smokescreen, ended up in Beast Wars 2nd as Starscream and BB. You know what I mean?
Instead of being G2 like he should have been.
Well, yeah. Well, that's just it. Instead of the G2, as Brett said before, with Megastorm from the Generation 2, going into even the Hero Optimus Prime. Hero Optimus Prime and Hero Megatron were repainted and re-released in the Robots in Disguise line as Bludgeon and Black Convoy Scourge. You know,
right,
a lot of those G2 molds still, and you know what the crazy thing is? Still to this day, once in a while they'll throw one out at us because its engineering, its safety stuff still conform to today's standards.
Correct. He's never got it.
We had Universe 1.0 toys. We had BotCon toys in 2005 and 2006 that were still G2 molds. You know what I mean? We as of 2005. Like again, I remember they were using wind shear from the Cyberjets, which was a Universe 1.0 repaint, which was done in like blue and
these guys.
Yep.
It was wind shear. He looked like Hooligan, pretty much.
I'm trying to look at
mold.
You know, I'm looking at a lot of this stuff, but the thing and the funny thing is though, as much as that's the case where you're saying, well, okay, there's never been straight up repaints of Generation 2,
like Pterodive.
That's another one. There's never been straight up reissues of G2 toys, but I will give you this: there's been homages to G2 stuff across the board. I mean, as recently as the Combiner Wars line, and then going straight back look, we had a Generations toy that was specifically made to make a nod to the G2 Laser Rod Optimus Prime, and we constantly, up to this point, always get some kind of nod to like whenever we get a sideswipe mold, there's always that consideration that there's going to be a black G2 repaint. Whenever we get a Dinobot, there's always that consideration. Well, maybe we'll do a red repaint or a blue repaint. Whenever we get a Megatron, the inevitable green tank one is going to come.
Wait a minute, real quick.
Okay,
Wait, whoa.
I have one. Well, I wanted to say one thing, Brett.
All right,
when it comes to the reissues of G1, you have to admit this. It has actually affected the vintage department because a lot of people,
of course,
they get this, they get parts, or they're able to get a hold of that toy again, right?
Yeah, but
all right.
All that
now you go in. Now step to G2.
Issue.
Well, what I was about to say is step to G2. What do you think is going to happen to the price of this guy in years to come compared to G1? It's going to skyrocket.
I can tell you right now.
I don't know. Carded ones still to go for modest value.
They do.
Well, they do.
I'm telling you right now that those. Wait a minute. The laser rods, I can tell you right now, the swords have gone up in value. They have. Just because they're harder and harder to find. So I agree with you on that. But 100% cut that. All right. So my question is, on the final thoughts, and I was thinking about this, G2 and G1, and I'm going to ask each of you. I'm going to tell you something based upon what I say. Is I want your opinion on. I've been looking at like the newer release lines, and they would do and just like Daniel said, they're always talking about when you release something, they're going to reissue it this way, and this way, so they can get the maximum use of that mold. I understand that, but in my opinion, and I could be wrong, but recently when they have released something and they've released it again in G2, the G2 seems to be more valuable, more wanted than the G1. What's your opinion on that? And I'll start with Daniel.
I think it's more so because usually and let's give an example, like the Combiner War stuff, because it's a big box set.
That's part of it, yes.
It's more of a collector market thing. Selling the individual limbs and stuff like that. I mean, granted, yes, Japan had a different way that they did Combiner Wars with the Unite. Right. But, I mean, all of the G2 stuff up to this point in general, has been more of a collector market kind of thing. If we got a G2 throwback, it was probably a collector club exclusive or a BotCon exclusive of some kind. I mean, I remember when everyone got very angry at BotCon 2010 when the collector club custom class figure was a G2 sideswipe.
Yes.
And everyone was very unhappy with that. They're saying, oh, well, that's never going to get a mainstream release. But you know what? You got to give credit to G2 when the Masterpiece line can have a G2 sideswipe. A collector market toy that is straight up gushing G2. It's not just even a shallow repaint. They took the time to retool it. They took the time to give new weapons, new face. I mean, there's clearly a market for that. And even almost kind of like showing that a toy that was only exclusively released in Japan, based on a comic book they never got. They never got those G2 comics from Marvel. Right. Maybe scanalations online today, but not the case otherwise. And yet here we go with a sideswipe of Masterpiece. The collector market of G2 has grown exponentially, and especially I find that when you're I'm just staring at the broad spectrum of so many toys that we've gotten throughout generations, and now with Combiner Wars and Titan Masters and stuff, and there always seems to be an attempt to always do something with a G2 color scheme. Maybe because it's so drastically different from what a Generation 1 color scheme would be of the same design, so it works hand in hand. But it just seems like it's very prevalent, and it's interesting.
Jason?
As far as I'm concerned, when it comes to this repaints and such, I think it's a great idea that they jumped on board whenever they decided to do that Combiner Wars version of G2 Minosaur that was never released. But I also see it as a shortfall because they never even attempted to do Defensor in G2 colors. Because a lot of people out there, they did a custom class with a sticker sheet of one of the figures, and that was it. whenever they could have clearly released an entire box set and people would have bought it. Everybody would have bought it if they're after the G2 stuff.
I think they would have bought it if maybe the sales of those individual box sets were better. Yeah. I think.
Well, those box sets, once those box sets ended up hitting Ross and such out here, those things went flying.
Yeah, but your argument should never be the discount market.
I agree with you there.
I hate to say it. Well, you look at how many Transformers been released throughout the years that end up having to hit clearance sales before people bought them. Once they bought them all, where does market come from? It's like the cult classic thing. Well, people don't jump on board with this thing until all of a sudden it becomes affordable and everybody jumps on it. Oh my God, there is actual money in this, and they jump right back in it again.
Yeah, but here's the thing. And Daniel, I'm alluding to what you were saying, and just listen to me first. But when you have when you have the idea, and you say it's a good idea, I mean, look how well it did in the open market. That's one thing. When you say, look how well it did on the I guess you would call it not secondary, but the discount market.
Yep.
It didn't do well in the open market, so maybe that wasn't such a good idea. So that's why some of that stuff doesn't work. We are our worst enemy as collectors. We ask for certain items, and then when we get it, we don't buy it. It goes to discount, and everyone loves it. We look at it as a win, but the Hasbro, Takaro, and it's a loss because it didn't sell on the first primary market. So
that's where I said, like with Menasor, if they would have released a Defensor to go with that Menasor, most people would have bought it, even if it was that. Because everybody's like, okay,
I'm gonna say
let's say this right now. You say most people would have bought it. Here's the thing: when G2 Superion came out, did most people buy it?
Quite a few did.
But not enough.
But not enough. When G2 Menasor came out, did most people buy it? Now those are
a lot of people did because of the fact that it was something. It basically harshed to something that never.
If most people bought it, then that would have justified to continue this trend.
Well, there was a couple things, if I remember correctly. I thought that it came out late. It wasn't around Christmas time. There was a couple things with that.
It also released very, very, very shortly right after Superion. That was the other problem. It didn't wait.
No, but
they released it too close.
Still, I still believe what Daniel's saying is true. Overall, niche items like that don't tend to sell well on the first primary market. And if you're saying, hey, it does well on the reduced market, that's not what they're looking for. I mean, otherwise they put it out for that price point to begin with. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. And if nothing else, we definitely, as a collector, are our own worst enemy. Like I said, we bitched and bitched and bitched. I mean, look at the first release of Masterpiece Primes, and I love this. Look at the first release Masterpiece Primes. And we bought it up. We bought every freaking one of them they did. If they did a Toys R Us exclusive, we bought it up. Battle Damaged, we bought it up. Animated, we bought it up. And I'm talking about the MP1.
Mm-hmm.
Bought them up. Gone. MP10 comes out. Holy crap. Well, I don't want this. I don't want that. Throw it away. Throw it away. I want this MP10. And they sold out. They sold out. Gone. Yep. So what they do? They made a second release, and guess what? We bought them up. They sold out. So then they went with I think it was Big Bad Toys.
Here they go.
And they had their own, which came with a little whatever. It doesn't matter. The point being is if it's
with the Vector Sigma you're talking about?
Yes. My point being is if we want it, we're gonna buy it up. And guess what they're gonna do? They're gonna puke out more. If it goes to the secondary market, we don't want that. We're not gonna make any more of it.
But look at G2. But look at G2 Sideswipe. He sold tremendously well. There was a lot of people out there really liked that one.
I liked it. I liked it, but I don't know numbers.
I don't think
as far as I've seen, quite a few people absolutely love that G2 Sideswipe.
It doesn't matter.
And some people were upset that we didn't get a G2 Prime because all they literally really had to do is redo the colors slightly and slap some stickers on it, and it would have been sold. Because you got people out there that literally collect nothing but Prime. Now, they would have bought it.
Well, that's the bait line.
Yeah, but you just
or the bait line,
you just said the problem with that statement. It was easy to make, but they didn't do it. Why didn't they do it? They felt not enough people wanted it. It's as simple as that. Not enough people bought the G2. Well,
think about how many times
not enough people bought the G2 Sideswipe for them to
G2 Bumblebee. G2 Bumblebee that went on crazy clearance in Japan.
Exactly. They tried it, but and then
maybe as low as $30.
You know, maybe Prime was next, but the market wasn't there. It's the way it is.
Well, there was a lot of people that I know that really wish they would have recolored Grimlock when he came out in blue.
Think about the cost factor. Let me tell you something. On that. You could do
there's stuff that I want, but it doesn't mean it's good for business. You know what I mean? Like I would love, I love.
So this is what you do.
Master Force, but doesn't mean that I need a Masterpiece Road King from Master
Okay.
Force.
Look, wait a minute.
Okay,
on a lesser degree.
Wait a minute.
On a lesser degree.
Let's look at Toy Fair.
Whoa. On a lesser degree, my wife loves purple. Okay? And she loves, let's just say, I'll pick a character at random. Chrome Dome. He's right here. So why not make a purple Chrome Dome? My wife loves it. Because not everyone likes that. That's what Daniel's saying.
It almost would be Headmaster RC.
You got to look at bigger than what I want. It's what, it's a toy company. They want it. They're talking about numbers. It just doesn't add up. The G2 stuff doesn't add up.
But look at online exclusive stuff that happens all the time. BBTS, i.e. this gigantic gift set that's coming out pretty soon.
Sure, go ahead.
How many people are going to be buying this thing? This isn't going to be sitting on Toys R Us shelves. This is a different one. It's from BBTS only.
Why do you think it's there?
So why couldn't they? Well, hang on. Why couldn't they have made some of those Masterpiece recolors exclusive for online purchase only? Same thing when they did with Unicron.
Because you said it yourself.
Primus years back.
You said it yourself. Why wouldn't they make it mass release? You said it yourself. Because they don't think they'll sell that many. So they
right.
make
you don't have to do mass release. You can do online exclusive.
No, but you have to understand something. Like how it works is when something is mass release, it's with the intention that they agree, here's a product that appeals to a wide audience. And if it appeals to a wide audience, it makes a wide amount of money and profit. You could ship more product, you could ship more cases. When you do something that is a niche market and you recognize it as a niche market, that's why the best example, 90% of BotCon's choices. BotCon's choices, with the exception of the 2007 line with the Games of Deception, most of those were stuff that, in all honesty, would have only really appealed to a minuscule market. Granted, there's exceptions in every year in general. You could say, well, that Scourge would have been good in 2009 for mainstream before we got our Generations one. But in general, look at the entire Shattered Glass line. Yes, it goes for big money in the secondary market with the collectors, but would have something like that done well in the mainstream market? That being said, well, it's awesome, but how many black Rodimus Primes, both in Japan and in America, have we gotten on shelves? Zero. We've gotten eHobby black Rodimus Primes in Japan. We've gotten, exclusives from BotCon and stuff, from whether if you want to call Sideswipe a black Rodimus Prime repaint from Animated, but even with the case of Shattered Glass Rodimus, when you got the Wild Rider, which was a Gente exclusive, black, even that kind of niche stuff was all relegated to an exclusive nature. If it was something that they firmly believed deep down was something of a huge profitable manner, then it would be out there. Why haven't we gotten a full, like, we've gotten trickled to us over and over and over Beast Wars stuff, but why haven't we ever gotten a mainstream Beast Wars line outside of a store exclusive or some kind of 10th anniversary small sub-line that was only available for a small period of time, or we got a small little PVC here and there, or a Creo that says his name is Cheetor. It's stuff that they always look at the grand spectrum and go, here's what's going to sell in the mainstream. And I'm going to go with those characters because those will be able to do well, while we still want to give stuff to the fans. We still want to say, hey, remember Lio Kaiser? But we're going to do a niche, expensive box set. We're not going to do Lio Kaiser as individual limbs. We're not going to give you just Yellbat or Hellbat or whatever IP name it was as an individual limb taking space on a Toys R Us shelf, when people are going to go, who the hell is that?
No,
Who's that blue jet?
Because they could could sell 20 renditions of Prime and Bumblebee. Because that's what they do.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Prime, Bumblebee, Starscream always gets like their thing. But this is what kills me is the fact that, okay, we had that platinum re-release of the ginormous Starscream, and how much of a shelf warmer was that thing?
Granted,
and
yes.
that was a right decision.
Are you talking about the Cybertron one?
You're not talking
about that gigantic thing.
You're not talking about
well,
that.
to be fair,
that
also,
one.
To be fair, also that was Cybertron, which already sales were really going down at that point. That's just before the kick in the butt from the movie continuity. So. And toy sales, but I think a lot of stuff was kind of. I mean, you could argue the same thing. How did Cybertron Menasor do, or Cybertron Metroplex, or
if you're talking about big figures, look at what was it, Beast Machine's Night Screen.
Cheetor? Oh, that one too, yeah.
Or Cheetor. You're like, what? Bigger.
Are we still collecting Cheetors for Dawn?
Yes, we are. Please bring them in. I will send them to him. And we actually... Yeah, it doesn't matter. Anyway, we'll get back. Bigger does not always mean better. Nostalgia does not always mean better. As much as I pride myself on loving nostalgia, and I think that all my collection is based on that, it's, the collector market, according to Hasbro, is like 10%. Maybe really 20% at tops. So they're looking at how many Cheetors, how many Bumblebees, how many Optimus Primals, how many Optimus Primes can I sell to the kids in as little space as possible on your Toys R Us shelves.
And you know what, too? And the funny thing is they test us every so often because, like, granted, was that Generations Universe 2.0 Cheetor a bad toy? Of course it was. But the point is they put one out there. It didn't do well, regardless of, was it a good toy or not? But it didn't do well. So they go, I don't think we're going to be putting out a lot of that character in the future. It wasn't received well. There's been terrible Bumblebee toys, but they probably sold well because of, just the character recognition.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, but if we're going to touch base on, like, characters being sold... Triptychon. The only people that really are going to relate to that are people our age, maybe a little younger, but little kids aren't going to know what Triptychon is.
Yeah,
but
there's a reason why we're getting Triptychon as a collector market oversized toy, and not the every other time we got Triptychon. He was a repaint. He was a Scourge repaint from Cybertron, or he was a miniature Scourge repaint from Legends. Like, but the only time he ever used it was a safe direction. It was never...
Wait. Why do you think he'll be so successful this time? I have a
theory.
In all honesty, success is subjectable because, in all honesty, was Metroplex successul?
Yeah.
I think
he sold out every time.
He did I don't know. Whenever he shows up at Costco, I always wonder sometimes.
I never saw him at a Costco.
Oh, many times.
Okay, I never saw him at a discount, but go ahead.
This is the thing. Most people that needed a Triptychon bought that Platinum reissue. So you're going to have that market of people that are like, no, I don't really want this new Triptychon. But you got the people that are literally... I'm finishing my masterpiece
maybe.
shelf, and they're going to be like, okay, I'm going to get it. or they're really, really, really into this Titan Returns line, and they want that Trypticon to go with that Metroplex next to that Fort Max. I understand some people never got hold of one. It's a cool toy. I'm not saying Trypticon sucks. I think it's awesome. But the niche market we're talking about, primarily are going to be collectors that are going to buy that Trypticon.
Well, yes and no. But here's the difference. And I'm going to leave it with these two options, and then we're going to close because we've been going too long, and hell, my computer could shut down any minute. You have all these extra little gadgets that it does, which I think are super freaking cool. It's a dinosaur. You're going to have people that just love dinosaurs. I mean, there's another market right there. So I think it's going to do well based on those. I really do. I
don't know.
Platinum just didn't do it as well as this one. This one just... And I am totally against all this new stuff. I mean, I've tried it. I don't like it. But this one, I like. I really do.
This is my thing, though. You're talking about dinosaurs, right?
I am.
Our last movie line was based on dinosaurs, and how much of that crap sat on shelves months after months.
I don't know. The dinosaurs are coming back.
Think about what's going on right now.
They're coming back. But a very, very
King Kong.
Guys,
I mean,
movie lines this big for a reason now.
Dinosaurs are coming back. We got a Power Ranger movie with dinosaurs. We got a Godzilla movie with dinosaurs.
It's a big theme. Let's put you this way. I would say, and I have absolutely nothing to do with it, but I would say that if a certain big robot convention was around, that they might theme it towards dinosaurs just because they're kind of big right now.
Yeah. I'm not against dinosaurs. All I'm just saying is, like, looking at the base market, the way dinosaurs sold during the Age of Extinction, there was a lot of stuff that literally sat on the shelves and never got.
I think Age of Extinction was a little more than just the dinosaurs.
Yeah, that movie sucked. That's what
the movie sucked, but the toys that they released for that were.
Well.
Now, Trypticon's awesome. I don't care. You could have painted that thing any color in the world, and it's still.
All I'm going to say is that if you ever wanted to see a new G2 colored Grimlock, it's going to be this year. I think that's what's going to happen. An official G2 colored Grimlock, because it's cheaper. They already got the mold. And right now, I think dinosaurs and everything are on the uprise. And I think if it's going to happen, it'll happen now.
The Power Ranger movie is just coming out right now. It's awesome.
I would love to see more than just Grimlock made in an official capacity. And I think this year will be the year, if any. Unless it's one of those ones that they've got it planned and it's not, got kicked back or whatever. But in any case. All right. So, there you go. We've done G1. We've done G2. We have...
Slap the movie line in the face.
Have we really decided who's better, or the big debate? I think we're all in agreement that they kind of need each other to keep it going the way it did.
I think every Transformer line has served some kind of purpose.
No matter
even
how
sublines. Even like a Machine Wars had its purpose. A Creo had its purpose.
Well, I mean, how many times do we talk about how, there's people that do not like the movies.
Oh, God. Well, they of course serve a purpose.
But they serve a purpose because of the popularity and bringing more people in. Of course. We've talked about this. So, yes. G1, G2, yes, they are their own separate entities. They are their own personal evils. Even though one's completely gaudy, I'm not gonna say which.
Just very 90s.
Yeah, that's 90s.
Just think about what you'd be wearing in 1993. It probably would match that.
There you go. Yeah, that's right. That's true.
Picture Will Smith, circa 1993, Fresh Prince. Colors are about right.
So you got your
hating on Generation 2 is so 1993.
So you got Fresh Prince Transformers. But in any case, I hope that we've enlighten some people to the history, and at least my big goal on this is those that were totally against one or the other have an open mind on why, and maybe have a better appreciation. That would be wonderful. So, but I think we're done. Any closing thoughts, Jason?
I say, guys, go out there and collect whatever you love. If you are collecting just to collect, that's great. But if you're collecting in overabundance and you don't know why you're collecting it, you might want to stop and weed your line down a little bit. I myself found myself having to do the same thing. And thanks to Dan up here, if it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't have had any Transformers left because I was selling everything. And I stuck with G2 because I love it. So it doesn't matter what cork it is. If you're an Energon lover and you love Energon, collect it and stick with it.
No matter how bad it is, stick with it.
Exactly. That's how I see it.
That'll be a cheap route.
Well, it is. And if you love the Unicron series and that's what you want, that's your G1.
It's okay. I collect really bad toy lines outside of Transformers anyways.
Yes, you do.
Cowboys of Moo Mesa.
Yes. All right, Daniel, final thoughts?
Final thoughts? You know what? Like I said before, every Transformer line has always had its purpose. I mean, what Brett did today is he kind of flipped it where the G2 lover had to praise G1, while the G1... Well, I wouldn't call myself a G1 lover. If I had to lean to one series, it'd probably be my boys and Beast Wars, but... G1 was my first taste of Transformers, but I feel that every Transformer series has its good and its bad. Every single one. I don't think any Transformer series is flawless.
Right.
I mean, I think even Beast Wars, which is my favorite series, I think its weakness is that it just doesn't have the iconic designs that Generation 1 has, and that's, I think, its biggest weakness, in the sense that people like cars more than they like cheetahs, because, you could just go to the zoo. I don't know. But it's just, I just feel that everything that we've ever had with Transformers has something to offer. Even Kiss Play, everything that we've ever had of Transformers has something to offer of a positive. And while we did do a grand debate today, I think ultimately in the end if anything, we fleshed out what truly was maybe the hidden gems that existed in each property at its time.
Right, exactly. So, with all that being said, whether you're like G1, G2, whatever, we've talked about this before. Whatever your G1 is, that's great. That's awesome. I really want people to get from this is to appreciate the whole history of where the line that we love came from and where it's going, because that's the only way it can continue. It really is. You talked about those that don't look at the past are doomed to repeat it.
Mm-hmm.
So there have been dark times, Energon, and there have been good times, but we don't want to repeat those. So, but in any case, I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned something. I hope that more than anything that you've been entertained with this. If you guys have any ideas that you want to send to us, please do. If you, as always, jump into the conversation while we're live. We'll listen to you and we'll answer your comments and see what we can do about that. So with all that being said, I'm going to wrap this one up because we've actually gone almost an hour and my computer hasn't crashed. So I'm going to chalk this up to a win on this.
Yeah, it's a win. It's a win.
So
we'll have better production in future weeks.
Exactly.
This was a special one today.
Yeah, if I could ever get this damn thing to work right, this would be wonderful. I love it.
This was the G2 of the show.
Exactly.
Come on, man. Lay off the GPS. It started in G1.
Now, this was the 1.5 because we had a half hour, and now we have an hour. So it's a 1.5 show. With that being said, I am Megamus, your host, and with me is Plasticon.
Yeah, you guys can go check out my YouTube at Plasticon1978. I got tons of videos on there, things doing with G2. I also reviewed the entire Machine Wars line, too. You can go check all that stuff out. Proto Man here, he's got some awesome stuff, too.
All right.
I do
Man?
this and that. I do this and that. Be sure to see us in the future.
Absolutely. So, I'm Megamus with TFYLP. Please check out our Patreon page and check us out on Facebook also. You can also check this out anytime you want. I think we're on just about every venue you could think of. We've been pimping ourselves out pretty good, as well as we can. So, check us out next time, and take care.